Our next speaker is Joe Kleen, who is from CowConsult in Uplengen in Germany, and he's going to give us a talk on perception of bovine ringworm by German practicing veterinarians.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to the ringworm talk. It is the only one in the program, and I think it tells a bit, but I'll come to that later in this talk. First of all, I would like to thank my co-authors, Ulrike Exner, Tatjana Andres, and Regina Strie from Boehringer Ingelheim in Germany, who made this talk possible. Well, I don't think there is a huge need to introduce bovine ringworm as a condition, and I'm fairly confident most of you will have seen a picture like this in their professional career once or twice, or probably even more. And I spare you the details of this. I mean, the causative agent is known, and you know it's mainly affecting young stock, and sometimes if really something goes wrong, we see this disease in adult animals. Anyway, there are instruments to be used against this condition, and one thing that is very well known about this is, of course, that bovine ringworm carries a zoonotic potential. It is a zoonosis. And I'm also quite confident that a few of you will have seen a picture like this themselves also once in a while. And me, having grown up on a dairy farm, I had this multiple times in my, life. And there was even in vet school a kind of joke when students managed to contract this condition while on clinics. Well, it's a nice pet you have there, and you can take it everywhere and doesn't ask you much. But anyway, it's a zoonosis. And if you look, for instance, into farms that are open to the public, for children especially, contracting ringworm is a huge concern for those who try to get children on the farm. There are numerous case reports on bovine ringworm or ringworm in humans, and I chose this as an example because I think the title shows a bit this crude fascination the human colleagues seem to have when they are confronted for once with a real zoonosis. When we talk about ringworm, we might think, okay, everything is known about it, and there is little to add to this knowledge. Well, what I did in preparation for this talk was to make a short literature search on what is actually published on the topic of ringworm. And it's certainly not all conclusive, covering everything, but when I looked for bovine ringworm on PubMed, this was roughly what came up. And I was quite astonished to see that the second largest bit on this topic were in fact case reports from human medicine. While this, what we actually would expect for such a widespread, frequently found disease like ringworm, namely papers on the epidemiology and control of this condition, is just a very small proportion of it. And most of it derives from Scandinavia, and here most of it from the Norwegian eradication program. I've learned that ringworm is a notifiable disease in ringworm, and that they effectively managed to eradicate this disease. So we have to state that it is a disease that is basically found everywhere, that is found quite frequently, that it has a high zoonotic potential, which seems to worry some of our human colleagues, but there is little knowledge on the epidemiology, the actual prevalence, and what to do about it, although instruments, namely vaccines, never mind whether they are inactive or live vaccines, are at hand. So, in conclusion, the status quo could be described as this. We have a limited knowledge on the prevalence and epidemiology. It seems to be a widespread disease with a huge zoonotic potential. And if we should decide to do something about this, first of all, we really need to create an awareness and make an active decision that something needs to be done about. And therefore, the question is interesting. how are vets, as the active part in any program against ringworm, how are they perceiving the situation? Now, this is what we did. On the course of CPDs in different locations in Germany, we developed a questionnaire and handed this out to the participants of this CPD. And the course was mainly dealing with young stock health and had a slight focus on bovine ringworm and a slight focus on communication, how to make change actually happen. And about 380 vets responded to these 12 questions, or I should say rather statements. And the vets could indicate their disagreement or agreement by scoring their statement with an agreement of 1, meaning I absolutely disagree, to 10, I totally agree. A short descriptive analysis and blocking of the points towards making the agreement as either total or partially agreement, and disagreement also totally or partially, and a neutral block followed. Please be aware, I noticed too late that the next slide is these questions top down. So the last question, the topic of bovine ringworm, has motivated me to come here to this CPD, is here on top. And as you can see, these are the answers. The topic of bovine ringworm was certainly not the actual driver for the vets to come there. Don't be confused. Here, the different geographical areas of Germany are listed separately, and the dark green bar indicates the total value of agreement. And as you can see, there was no large difference between areas. And what you can also see that there seemed to be a slight, well, inclination rather to agree or at least stay neutral instead of saying, well, I completely disagree. What we can also take from this overview here is that vets seem to be very happy with vaccination. They think vaccinations are effective, that it is something that should be used, and that vets like to recommend the use of vaccines. So, first conclusion, vaccines are there and vets are convinced about their effectiveness. When it comes to the actual perception of the condition, the vets more or less agreed, and partly totally agreed, to the statement that bovine ringworm was posing a serious animal health problem. And maybe just stop here for a second. I'm not quite sure whether I would have answered, yes, it is a serious animal health problem, if I had been confronted with this question some time ago. And the vets rather disagreed on the statement that the zoonotic character of the bovine ringworm was sufficiently recognized. Hardly any totally agreement, a little bit partially agreement, and they stayed rather neutral or partially disagreed on this. In terms of activity, what are vets actually doing this? There was this question, I'm treating for bovine ringworm regularly, and there might be a slight criticism here because treating was originally thought to include vaccination. I can't be sure whether the vets who filled in the questionnaire also realized that vaccination was included here. Anyway, the vets rather agreed to this statement and said, yeah, that's something I'm dealing with rather frequently. And they even more agreed to this, to the fact that they were diagnosing bovine ringworm regularly on the farms that they are visiting. But note that there is a difference between treatment, so active doing something about this, and the noticing, the diagnosis of bovine ringworm. When it came to the perceived perception of the farmers, the picture looks quite differently. So the vets have been asked, how do the affected farms feel about bovine ringworm? Do they think it is a problem? And here the picture looks quite differently. So a huge proportion of vets who said, well, rather disagree. Quite a few stayed neutral. Some partially agreed, and very little proportion said, well, yeah, they see it as a problem. So we may conclude from this that there is a, well, difference in the perception between vets and farmers. And do the affected farms ask for advice? Well, also rather neutral, some disagreement, little agreement to this. So what do we make from this? I'm certainly not standing here and saying, well, this is the general picture of bovine ringworm in Germany. And we have to keep in mind that this was a convenient sample and, once again, a CPD which has been partly dealing with the problem itself. Nevertheless, from these answers, I think we may at least conclude that generally the bovine vets seem to regard ringworm as a widespread problem. It is out there, at least in Germany. It's frequently diagnosed, and they see it as a problem. On the other hand, they are not happy with the way and extent that it is recognized and addressed, certainly with respect to its zoonotic character. Vets seem to experience less attention and initiative from the vets to do something about this. So we might speculate that vets would like to do something more about it if they would be prompted to do so. And this in spite of the fact that there is an instrument, namely vaccines, available that could quite effectively do something in the fight against bovine ringworm. And once again, it is a disease with a high zoonotic potential. In conclusion, I wonder what this could tell us. And here I come back to the start of my talk. The farmers may experience a phenomenon that can be described as anchoring, basically saying that something that has always been that way must be normal. In other words, I've always had ringworm on my farm, so it's nothing unusual. Maybe it's a nuisance, but it's nothing I really have to worry or even do something about. And farmers hence show little initiative to do so. And the vet is remaining, asking him or herself, so what can I do if the farmer doesn't want to do something about this? I started this talk with a remark on the fact that this is here the only talk on bovine ringworm on the whole of the conference. And once again, it's a disease with a high zoonotic potential, which is widely recognized in human medicine. Well, it is recognized, let us put it that way, in human medicine. There is an instrument, vaccine available, but this is the only talk on this condition on this conference. And we have little knowledge on the actual condition. So if we actually want to achieve a change and get rid of this zoonotic threat, which is certainly not life-threatening, but I think more than a nuisance, we need more facts and figures. And I invite you to review the literature for yourself, and you will see that apart from very little anecdotal knowledge, there is very little solid evidence bovine ringworm knowledge out there in this world. And we need more facts and figures to do something about this condition, if we want to. And with this, Mr. Chairman, I'm at the end, and I'm happy for anyone to disagree. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Joachim. Are there any questions? Yep, one there.
I'm a dairy practitioner in the U.S., and we don't have any effective vaccines there that I'm aware of. I mean, there's none that are recognized, or at least the perception is that it's not even worthwhile to vaccinate for it. What's different in Germany, that the vets there, or do you have a good commercial vaccine? Or?
Well, there are commercial vaccines, but once again, I don't think it's a rational problem. It's always been there, and it's not only Germany. You find ringworm in a lot of European countries, and except for Scandinavia.
It's widespread in the U.S. I mean,
okay, so, and well, of course there are vaccines, quite a few of them actually.
Actually treating the cases, or what are the German vets doing for it?
Well, it depends. Take a vet, you have one solution. Take another one, you have another solution, I would guess.
I mean, are there therapeutic?
Yes, they are. They are.
Like Grecia-fulvin or things like that? Those are legal?
Things like that, yeah. And I said that there are numerous papers and reports on treatment options, and some of them are, well, normal, some of them are rather bizarre.
I know that's part of the reason that it's kind of shoved to the side in the States, is that there's not much that we have to fight it. I mean, we can, like Grecia-fulvin is completely illegal there. You can't touch that or put that into any food animals, or you'd probably get in real trouble.
Well, the
so
point
we go
is,
off-label with things like Captan paste and you know, different things like that.
Well, the point is that the vaccine is certainly the thing of choice. And also, if you look at the use of vaccines, it spreads from vaccinating individual animals as a form of treatment to treatments of whole groups or even herds to prevent this. So once again, I find it quite disturbing that we have actually little knowledge base what the best approach is. And as I've said, the only papers that seem to really are dealing with this question are those from the Norwegian eradication program. Otherwise, there's little else.
And what is CPD that you referred to?
Sorry, continuing professional development. So it's education, yeah.
Please.
I had a question. In some of the graphs, it looked like from northern to southern Germany, there was quite a bit of agreement on things. Have you had a look at what that's causing that? Is it different housing conditions or different lobbyism or something?
It's probably more of the farm structure that you have, especially in southern Germany, smaller farms. And it may affect the management, also the perception. The differences were not significant, so you could speculate here and there. But what I found was that in the east of Germany, which of course has a different tradition, the attitude towards vaccination and tolerance against it was slightly different from the west of Germany.
Just two questions. First one, what actually is the impact of bovine ringworm on cows and dairy cows and production? And the second one, the impact on the workers or persons who work in the industry. In other words, has it reached the stage where one might say it's an occupational disorder of any sort?
I'm not aware or not sure about the legal classification of this disease if you would contract it during the job. However, if you look at the reviews from human medicine, you get the impression that it is basically a condition that troubles some human practitioners. Other case reports from human medicine, they are from all over the world, from Japan to Africa and all types of systems, housing systems. It can sometimes take the character of an outbreak and the workers affected. So that really dozens of the workers are, affected by the condition. When it comes to the impact of the animal, that's the big question, really. If you look at the papers, there is no clue what the problem connected to this may actually be. There's only one paper from Norway which is working on that question, and there is something like hide quality, so that this byproduct is affected in its quality, but otherwise we really don't know if there are any side effects. But apart of this, I think if parents would say to children, for instance, don't go to the dairy farm, or you have a skin illness, a skin condition, I think this is something that needs to prevent it anyway. And also the health protection of workers on a dairy farm is something that would justify any measure taken against bovine ringworm.
Just to clarify animals are reared for their production and in an economic enterprise. So what is it that moves us to spend a lot of time treating? Is it that obviously the animals are in discomfort? Is it that the secondary infection comes as a result? Or, I'm not very familiar with this topic, but I'm interested.
The answer to this question is I don't know, and no one will be able to give you a solid answer based on evidence answering your question. It is basically a disease, a condition that is there. But if you look in the literature, what does it actually mean? What's the economic impact? What's the impact on the animal? Nothing to find. Nothing.
Okay. One last question.
Daniel Ohoff from Brazil. Two statements and one question, fast.
Thank you.
One, it probably has not so much importance for the bovine health because it's curing itself. So it's not discussed under the Congress because it's self-curing. Second, very important, non-puberous children can be affected and can get severe cases of Caron-Celsi on the head. We adult people, we get only small lesions on the arms and wherever, but not on our head. On the head. And I think this is a big question for the zoonosis. And one question, did you validate your questionnaire? Because this is a social science methodology.
I know.
Okay,
and,
thank you very much.
We made it to our best knowledge. If I may add something to this, when we were thinking about the condition, we thought that it is maybe something like a signal differentiating good and poor management. You can always find a kind of impression. This was also reported from the vets taking part in this questionnaire, that some of them had an idea that ringworm is affecting only certain farms. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, Joachim, thank you very much indeed for your interesting talk.
Thank you.